Major support for Carolina Business Review is provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. And Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
For as long as we have been facilitating dialogues here, education has come up as one of the most important ways and places to allocate capital and resources. In general, an investment in education is never a bad commitment of funds. Hi, I'm Chris William, and welcome to the most widely watched source of Carolina business and public policy. Longtime North Carolina Board of Education Chair Bill Cobey joins us later to talk about the rubs and the challenges around North Carolina fully allocating and implementing what is needed. But before that, what else is happening here in our region? This time, Chris Fitzsimon and Frank Knapp will join this week's discussion, and we hope you'll stay.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina. Please visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Barings, a leading global asset management firm dedicated to meeting the evolving investment and capital needs of its clients. Learn more at barings.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Frank Knapp from the Business Alliance for Protecting the Atlantic Coast and the South Carolina Small Business Chamber, Chris Fitzsimon of NC Policy Watch, and special guest Bill Cobey, Chairman of the North Carolina State Board of Education.
Hello, welcome to our program. Gentlemen, happy spring. Wow.
Yes, thanks for having us.
The season is here. This is crazy. We're all going to be distracted by summer here. So let's get to what is going on. Chris, in North Carolina, there seems to be a thawing of some sort toward a warming relation to possibly Medicaid dollars. Am I wrong to think that? Or now that healthcare, the reform of healthcare has kind of been sidelined, do you think North Carolina might look differently at this?
Well, I think it's still up in the air, although a dramatic advance in that idea. Representative Donnie Lambeth, a former hospital administrator, and several other Republican members of the State House introduced what he didn't want to call it Medicaid expansion, but it is in fact expanding Medicaid to people who don't now have it, sort of patterned on the program that Mike Pence pushed when he was the governor. Which has a lot of work requirements, has premiums for recipients. Some of those things are troubling to progressive folks, but the idea that we would try to access these federal dollars and figure out a way to give health care to 300,000 to 400,000 North Carolinians who can't afford it and don't have it, I think is a major advance. The downside of that, the Speaker of the House, Tim Moore, recently spoke out and said he wasn't crazy about the idea. So
but he didn't take it off the table.
He didn't take it completely off the table, and Representative Lambeth is very well respected, and he also talks a lot about the impacts on hospitals. That's his career. And there are a lot of rural hospitals, especially in North Carolina, that are having a very hard time and are very worried about their future, and this would be a big help to them as well.
Do you think somebody like a fiscal conservative, but clearly somebody that understands a balance sheet and can explain it and articulate what dollars like that, like Dale Folwell, do you think somebody like Dale Folwell would come down in support maybe somehow?
I don't know. It'd be interesting to know. I mean, it is frustrating when we have this debate in North Carolina and people try to portray this as some far left liberal idea, and I always remind them, for everybody from Christie to Kasich to Mike Pence, almost half the 31 states that have expanded to have Republican governors. They understand, and you could tailor this plan under Obama. I'll bet you could tailor it even more with the Trump administration if you were worried about specific aspects of it. The idea is we have to help these people who don't have health care because it not only helps them, it helps the state, helps the economy, helps hospitals. So I hope that if it gets a serious hearing, I'm cautiously optimistic it'll open a lot of people's eyes.
That's a good way to put it, Frank. Do you think South Carolina State House would give it a serious hearing, Medicaid expansion?
Well, I don't think I wish we had that legislation that you were just talking about in South Carolina. We do have a expansion like Arkansas did, a bill that's in the House, but probably need to have something like you're talking about. I think that the South Carolina General Assembly would probably be interested in looking at Medicaid expansion if the feds turn it into some type of a block grant program or some other type of program where it allows the state to be a little more flexible and to have some other requirements, personal responsibility requirements, that's possibly, maybe they will look at it then. But it's, this issue, the numbers are there, that it would show how it would help South Carolina. It could relieve state spending and replace it with federal spending. And the information's there. It's just been such a hard partisan issue over the years. Fortunately, we do have a new governor now, right, who has not talked about it. He has plenty of other things on his plate. But, I think it's probably going to take Congress to change Medicaid a little bit before South Carolina would look at it.
So do you think sans a full reform of health care, Frank, as you talked about, the way it needs to be a block grant or something different than the way it comes from the feds now, Chris, do you think that it could change without having some kind of health care reform?
I do. What's fascinating about this is that one of the last arguments against expanding Medicaid is we don't know what's going to happen in Washington right after the election. We don't know what's going to happen in Washington. They're going to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. We shouldn't do anything. But then, as it turns out, I was fascinated during the debate in Washington where one of the sticking points was the Republican governors going to the White House and Congress saying, wait a minute, whatever you do, we just expanded this program. We have all these people insured. You can't just throw them off. So we want to be protected in some way, or we want to be giving more of a block grant or more of a per capita expenditures, which I would think would be an incentive for states to say, well, wait a minute, if you're going to change the entire system and help those states more who have already expanded it, we need to figure out a way on our own to get into that expansion game. Again, because it not only helps people's lives, which I hope is the most important thing, but it's a boon to the economy, every study has shows. It saves the state money, every study has shown, and it helps hospitals. John Kasich's Department of Medicaid in Ohio found he saved $70 million since he expanded Medicaid in Ohio.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's clear that the numbers are on our side, and
business is behind this, right? There's not a surprise.
A lot of businesses are behind it. They understand it.
A majority?
Hospitals, and I can't answer that question, but that has never moved the needle before, because it's been such a hot partisan issue. And I agree with you that Medicaid was what you said, Chris, Medicaid was an issue when it came to reform. And that was good. And I had good confidence that was going to happen when they were talking about replacing the Affordable Care Act, that we had enough states that had expanded Medicaid, and darn it, they weren't going to lose that extra money, and that's what really helped sort of bring it to the reform to an end.
And your point about so many states doing it, just the plain momentum would carry along those states that didn't want to do it. But here we have both Carolinas that are not accepting it yet. Let's move on to you called it partisan politics. The Southern partisan politics is its own special brand of entertainment. And in South Carolina now, there is some real ethics questions around Richard Quinn and associates in Columbia and what they may and may not have done with some of their clients who are politicos and sitting politicians. But are we going to see an expanded question around legal maneuvers by politicians when it comes to taking education, or not education dollars, but campaign money? Or I guess the bigger question here is, Frank, is how much wider can this probe around ethics become in South Carolina?
Well, we don't know. There's a special prosecutor involved in this that was appointed by our Attorney General, Alan Wilson, and that special prosecutor is doing a very thorough job. I mean, he's already got himself a former House Majority Leader. He got, of course, the former Speaker of the House Majority Leader.
This is Bobby Harrell from Charleston.
Right, and of course now he also has a very reputable, longtime Republican senator that everybody liked, also now has been suspended for some problems with the
And you're talking
money.
About John Corson
yes,
from Lexington?
Yes, I am. And of course, at the center appears to be this firm, this political consulting firm. It seems to be in the center of all of this. We don't know. The special prosecutor has been very close-lipped. He's not telling what's going on, but when he is moving and he's getting some of these big fish. I mean, these are really big fish, and so we have to wonder what's next. And we don't know who's cooperating. We don't know who's talking, and he's got the power to make people talk, and I think that's what's happening. So I don't know where this will end up, but this could be extremely big.
From your seat in North Carolina, and when you watch what's going on in South Carolina, what do you think about it?
Well, you know, North Carolina has been through a version of this. We had a Speaker of the House who went to jail. We just had a sitting longtime Republican state senator who was indicted for misuse of campaign contributions, turning it to personal use. I think.
But are these systemic, Chris? I mean, are these broad systemic questions?
I think one of the issues is I don't think we changed the law in North Carolina in 2006 after the Speaker of the House went to jail to try to tighten up the rules about what you can do with campaign money. But I don't think the rules are tight enough, and I don't think the legislators and their treasurers are still quite aware of what you should and what you shouldn't do with the campaign money. But the public sure is. And when you bring this up, if it becomes an issue and there's repetitive use of what appears to be questionable use of campaign money, it becomes a big issue. I think it's the next step in ethics reform. We had a big, North Carolina had one of the weakest ethics laws in the country for years. And finally, back in the 90s, we started reforming our lobbying and ethics laws. So the scandals, I think, have been not as numerous, but I think we are now starting to see sort of a new generation. And another point about that is, and this isn't a disparagement of Republicans at all, when you have one party in power for so long, and you have institutions inside and outside of government that accumulate that power and have these relationships, I think a lot of times people start to slip ethically. Maybe they're not bad people, they start making one mistake and then it becomes easier. So I would argue that one of the things that we need a vibrant, whatever party you're in or whatever your persuasion, a vibrant two-party competition that keeps everybody honest.
Henry McMaster, Governor of South Carolina, has taken over Nikki Haley's last part of her term, has announced that he wants to run for governor and run the seat again. So is Catherine Templeton. So will this become an issue in the governor's race?
Well, we don't know. If Henry McMaster is somehow implicated in the misuse of funds, then it will become an issue. But I don't think that. I think it'd be difficult for a challenger to Governor McMaster to try to hang it around his neck if he is not implicated in any way.
Yeah, okay. We're going to bring the special guest on, gentlemen. Thank you. And we didn't get to BAPAC, and I know protecting the Atlantic coast from drilling, seismic activity right now is something you want to do. We might try to get to that here before the show is out, Frank, but thank you for joining us. Before we get to our special guest, so education really has been a very critical issue in the Carolinas about investing and not just discussing, but actually moving the needle and making education better, and teacher pay and principals and student outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. We've got a special program coming up in May. It will be on location at the campus of SAS in Cary, North Carolina. And on that program will be Jim Goodnight, Chairman and CEO of SAS, Vanessa Harrison, who is the President of North Carolina AT&T, Ward Nye, the CEO of Martin Marietta, and Terry Aiken, who is the CEO of Cone Health. And the idea will be to talk about not just third grade reading scores, but all things that lead to kids that are successful by third grade and beyond. And we hope that you will watch that program with interest. I know our guest will be. Our guest, interestingly enough, is a survivor to some sort and also akin to a Swiss Army knife. He has seen and experienced many things and can adapt adeptly to political situations, thankfully for the state. But given the tenor and tone of contemporary public discourse, how long would he like to continue to lead and serve? Joining us now is the North Carolina State Board of Education Chairman, Bill Cobey. Your Honor, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, sir.
I don't want to ask you how long you're going to serve right now, Bill, but I do want to ask you. So now we've got a new governor in North Carolina.
Right.
We also have a new DPI head, State Superintendent of Education, named Mark Johnson. And it seems like the State Board of Education and DPI have always been trying to find a peace in which they could move forward around education issues. There is now a lawsuit from the State Board of Education to stop some pending legislation. Explain where we are with that lawsuit. Why was that important to put a stake in the ground with a lawsuit?
Well, first, Chris, there has been some friction over the decades between the elected superintendent and the State Board of Education. This is sort of the next chapter in that friction. But we haven't changed anything. We're functioning exactly the way we did with June Atkinson, the former state superintendent. But the General Assembly sought to take power, constitutional power, away from the state board and transfer it to the superintendent of public instruction. And we swore as a board to uphold the Constitution, and we take that seriously. So we went to court to protect our constitutional powers to supervise and administer a free K-12 education in North Carolina. And we got a temporary restraining order, and on June 29th, a 3-judge panel will hear the merits of the case. And we are very confident that the merits are on our side and that we will prevail.
Could there be an appellate process, or could it end up going to a higher court if that decision is not liked by one side or the other?
Well, I know one thing, that personally, if we didn't get the decision I believe we should have, but I can't speak for the board, but I would want to appeal it to the appellate level.
Chris?
I was going to ask you, one of the big issues now in North Carolina, of course, is, I guess, House Bill 13, but for people who maybe aren't familiar with it, the class size reduction that was mandated. The schools are now saying they're going to have to lay off art, music, and PE teachers if they don't get some more flexibility. The House passed that bill to give them the flexibility, and the Senate has yet to take it up. I wondered what your views or the views of the state board are about what should happen.
Well, the state board is in strong support of HB 13. We think that's a good solution, a good compromise, and we're very hopeful that the Senate will take it up quickly because we're running out of time. But there's no question that when that law was passed, we were not consulted. And so there were, I guess, unintended consequences. I don't think anybody would have put us in this kind of situation where we won't have those teachers that we need in the elementary level.
So what do you think, why do you think that law was passed? What was the outcome?
Well, I think over the years, there's always been this desire to reduce class sizes. And, you know, that's a good thing. But then when you reduce class sizes and you take away the flexibility from the local districts to have slightly larger classes on average, and thereby you eliminate these special teachers. That's how they hire the special teachers, by selectively expanding the size of a class or classes.
Chairman Cobey,
yes.
I don't know if you know that I'm also the president and CEO of the South Carolina Small Business Chamber of Commerce. And for years, I mean, we're talking about back in the 2000s, South Carolina has a problem with matching the skills needed for the manufacturing that's coming into the state.
Yes.
And we continue to have this problem today, and our General Assembly is continuing to try to come up with a plan that would train the K through 12 people coming out of high school for these high-skilled jobs. Is North Carolina having something like that, or what's your program here?
Well, we have a lot of programs, but we have this fantastic community college system that we're working with through early colleges, middle colleges, enrolling high school children in the community college so they can develop these skills. And we're very coordinated with our Commerce Department. And so we're making progress. Is it perfect? No. And we've established pathways in certain areas that there's great need, and we're trying to address it. And, you know, I would like to think that these things could be solved overnight, but Frank, I think you're telling me they can't, but we're doing the best we can.
And what kind of back and forth do you have with Department of Commerce, whether it was John Scavarla or Tony Copeland now, or even Sharon Decker before that? Does Commerce and Board of Education, or education in general, interact on a much more intimate way when they're trying to recruit or trying to develop?
Well, we are the kind of the supporters of what's going on in community college or the Department of Commerce. They are co-located in the same building, so we have interaction. It generally is more at the staff level, and of course the governor has his education cabinet, and that's a way we can bring all these interests together.
Yeah.
Obviously, the North Carolina General Assembly's, the Senate will release its budget in the not too distant future. And teacher pay is still a big issue. I think we're 44th in the country now. Our average teacher pay is still lower than every state that borders us, but our principals are 50th in the country. And I wondered if what your concerns are about, and putting aside sort of political philosophy, the Senate wants to cut taxes another $1 billion at the same time that we really have these needs. And what are your hopes for the Senate budget in terms of compensation?
Well, my number one priority personally, but it's certainly a priority of our board, is to increase principal and assistant principal pay significantly. Because what I've learned through the years, and it applies to education, if you don't have the right leader in the school building, you're not going to get the right results. So I don't have any idea how we got in such bad shape, but we need to correct it. And we also need to continue to increase our teachers' pay. I'm encouraged that we've worked on it the last few years, but we need to go further. Our state board has established a goal to be the #1 state in the Southeast in compensation. Sorry, Frank.
But I'm glad.
No, because this national average thing is kind of ethereal. But this is our neighborhood.
Right.
This is where we compete. We're competing against South Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee. We should be #1, and that's what we're shooting for.
At the top of the show, we were talking about Medicaid expansion and how South Carolina and North Carolina both have resisted doing that. One of the arguments that legislators have been using against Medicaid expansion is that they can't afford to put more money into that Medicaid program because then they can't put as much into education that they need to do. When all those conversations over the years been going on in North Carolina, did you all weigh in on that? Did you say to
yes,
we've
weighed it.
Watch out?
Frank, we've weighed in it recently because all of a sudden we realized that we weren't getting a lot of Medicaid dollars that could be used for kids in the school, and it's multi-millions of dollars. So back to Representative Donnie Lambeth, who was also on the Winston-Salem Forsyth Board of Education. He's been the leader in trying to access that Medicaid money for the schools because, you know, we realize that the education process starts at birth. It doesn't start when they show up in kindergarten. So we have adopted what CDC calls the whole community, whole school, whole child concept. And so we're all about meeting. We have a whole child North Carolina committee that we're bringing all the public and private people together to try to address the whole needs of the child so they can learn and can progress.
And you know, part of the syllabus of all that, as you described it, Mr. Chairman, is this whole idea of Common Core that over the last 5 years it's been tender and contentious and debated, and it's getting ready to change for next year. So what do we need to understand about Common Core and how it's applied?
Common Core is basically gone. It's gone nationally. You know, each state can do what they want to, especially with the new Every Student Succeeds Act. And we have taken Common Core, which only affects English language art and K-12 math. We've already revised the high school math from Common Core. We just, our last meeting, adopted standards for English language art K through 12. They're very much North Carolina standards now, and we have made significant changes so they are North Carolina standards. And you know, what's the problem is, Chris, these are standards. The standards mean what is to be taught at each grade level. It's not curriculum, it's not teaching methods, and yet if you go online, you wouldn't know that because people that are against what we're doing will try to characterize it as teaching methods or curriculum. That's the business of our local districts.
Do the practitioners of supplying the education to the kids, to the teachers?
Yes.
Do they get it?
Yes, and we have done a very, very thorough process with their involvement, thousands, hundreds of them involved in the process of revising the standards, because the practitioners are the ones that we want to embrace the standards, and because they're the ones that have to implement it. We're counting on them.
We have about 30 seconds left. Quick follow-up question on anything?
Well, just one quick question. It's probably too unfair in 30 seconds, but there's a lot of battles about charter school funding, it seems, every session. When can we figure out a way to make sure charter schools have enough resources without taking a lot more money from traditional public schools?
Well, Chris, I'm not getting into that battle. The legislature has plenty of battles going on, but we're doing a good job with charter schools. We have some very outstanding charter schools. Obviously, we have some that are failing, and we're not going to let them stay around. Mm-hmm. But the long-term trajectory, I think, they're going to be a good part of this whole equation.
That's like asking you in a few seconds how you feel about Carolina's compliance to the NCAA, but we won't
Hey,
get into that.
I used to be athletic director.
I know. That's why I was going to do it. We'll talk about it after the show. Mr. Chairman, thanks for being on the program.
Okay, great to be here with you.
Good to see you. Chris, thank you.
Thank
good
you.
to see you again. Frank, I promise we'll
have to
talk
bring me
about
back.
Protecting the coast. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for watching us. Until next week, I'm Chris Whittiam. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, Barings, Grant Thornton, Novant Health, Sunoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.